was at the dinner the other day, and me and my wife were having a debate on whether or not the wedge salad was an actual salad. Of course it's a salad, I said. She said it was a lazy salad. It's like the chef just stopped. It's more of a vehicle for blue cheese dressing and bacon and tomatoes. And, iceberg doesn't really have any. Hey, how's it going? My name is Dan. Welcome to Bay Area Mukbang. This is the first episode. I am here with my friend Heather Frambach, a food systems specialist, and we have food from a place in Emeryville, California called Los Moles. So how this works is we're just going to gorge on this stuff, and then we're going to do an interview while we do it. Maybe you can tell them what you do.
Absolutely. So I basically work a lot with supply chains in terms of connecting BIPOC, small, mid-sized farmers and ranchers into schools, tech companies, hospitals, and institutions. A lot of what I do is motivated by economic justice, racial justice, basically trying to correct a lot of the injustices we see in the food system as a whole, where all these big institutions and buyers have a lot of power, farmers and ranchers have very little. So how do we connect the dots and make sure that we can close the loop and make sure that BIPOC farmers and ranchers get to be active in the food system and get to sell the things that they grow and produce for us?
Yeah, because there's a lot of, from what you've told me in the past, you told me there's a lot of barriers in between them and just like selling their boxes of food.
Absolutely. So when you look at these large institutions and buyers, they say they want to do the right thing. They say they want to buy from small, mid-sized producers, but their processes that they have in place are actually really discriminatory or bureaucratic in ways that can really inhibit doing the things that we want to do, even if they have these big sustainability goals or justice goals. So basically what I do is step in there and help facilitate all the supply chain things that need to happen. I'm sort of like a fixer for regional food systems, and making sure that those connections get made and that dollars flow in a just and dignified way to the people who are growing our food for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so much of buying food now in a grocery store is like people are looking more for like buying from smaller farmers, but it's labeled as like, oh yeah, organics, and it's still from this giant farm, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's such a bureaucratic,
like,
I don't know, hullabaloo.
Yeah, there's so much greenwashing. There's so much that we don't see in the food system. It's so opaque. It's really hard for everyone to understand, even those of us who are actively within it. So bringing that stuff to light, and understanding what needs to happen in order for these just and dignified transactions to occur, that's where I get in the mix.
Man, so let's talk about this food that we got. We got it from the restaurant Los Moles, which is a lot of people's favorite brunch spot around here in the East Bay. And I want you to talk about a little bit why you chose this.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm half Mexican. Mexican food, I feel like, is basically like 9 to 12 different cuisines in one, right? Mexico is a huge and complicated country with a complicated history. And to me, mole is one of the greatest expressions of that nuance and complexity in Mexican cuisine.
Yeah, this is like an ancient fucking thing.
Yes,
like mole.
Exactly. So Mexican cuisine as a whole is, obviously has the indigenous history at its core. And then, streams and streams of European influence from the French occupation of Mexico to the Spanish, of course, to Dutch, to Lebanese. And mole in particular still has that deep indigenous heart to it, I think. And there's actually a legend that says that mole was invented when an ancient abuela was making a salsa and her spice cabinet fell into the pot.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that mole is a beautiful platform for so many different types of expressions of flavors. The classic mole has that deep chocolate, mysterious funk. And then so many of these that we got and that you made some great selections have so many different other flavor expressions that I feel like really represent the diversity and history of Mexico as a country and set of cuisines.
Yeah. So I think we should probably start eating.
I think we definitely should.
This is a mukbang and we're supposed to eat a shitload of food. Also, I am going to ask you some questions about your relationship to food personally, not just about how you, like, we can go in and out of like what you do because it's so important. Like the work that you're doing and the scale at which you're doing it is really, really impressive. But also it's like we all have these relationships with food and yeah. So let's
Absolutely.
just
Let's do
dig
it.
in. Let's eat. I'm gonna go. It's hard to figure out where you're gonna start.
Well, I'm starting with this quesadilla.
Yeah, and some consomme.
Absolutely.
We'll stir it up. Don't worry about reaching either. So, who are you currently working with? Mostly, is that going?
Mm-hmm.
Tight. I'm gonna get that.
I think most people would recognize two of the big organizations I'm working with, which are Google and Kaiser Permanente. So with Google in particular, I have a couple of different irons in the fire. One of the main projects I'm working on is just a BIPOC sourcing pilot. So basically, with their 3 Bay Area campuses, so that's Mountain View, Sunnyvale, and San Bruno, which is the YouTube campus, I organized a set of BIPOC farmers in the Salinas Valley, packaged it through an aggregation partner into Google's distributor, and negotiated with those Google campuses about how to get that food in a way into those employee cafes on campus.
Yeah.
So that's the start of something that is really difficult to do in my line of work, which is how do you get into a corporate food service environment where the barriers, like you were saying earlier, are just so intense. There's, even with all those layers I just mentioned, there's dozens of people involved. You've got Google leadership, you've got their food service vendor leadership, you've got the people in the employee cafes pressing the order button, you've got the distributor, you've got my distributor, and you've got my farmers. So a lot of what I do is organize all those people so that it doesn't shut down, which is a lot of times what happens in this work, right? Google will say, I want to source from a good farmer, and somewhere along that chain it falls apart. So I just keep going back around and around and making sure that the things that happen need to happen. And then with Kaiser, they have a goal of getting to 100% local and sustainable food by 2025. And as you might imagine, they're a little bit behind.
Yeah. Well, it seems like there's so much of it. I mean,
talk about bureaucracy, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's American healthcare.
Yeah. And so as you can imagine, the food side of that is just as bureaucratic as the healthcare side. So a lot of what I work on with Kaiser is their patient meals program. So the things that you're eating if you're staying overnight at Kaiser or for multiple days at a time. So working with the manufacturer that makes those patient meals and plugging in really good farmers into that supply chain and making sure that the menu substitutions happen, the new products can be created. So those are the two of the main products I'm working on, and I'm working on a lot of others with different other tech companies, other hospital groups, and things like that. But that's, those are two good examples of things going on.
That's huge. You need to eat because we have so much food. So what, I think we already heard about a little bit about the philosophy behind the work that you do, but what's your main goal?
Yeah.
Because we've talked about sustainability, and we've talked about regenerative farming, and we've talked about food systems, the way people buy food and stuff like that in our conversations before this interview. But there's so much behind it.
Oh yeah.
But a simplified version of your philosophy would be.
Yeah. Simplified version would be, in my soul, I'm an anti-capitalist, which is why it's so funny that I'm engaged in essentially supply chain work, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at even really great thinkers from the left, from food sovereignty, for instance, they'll say there's actually nothing inherently unjust about a market. If you think about an Andean potato farmer who grows potatoes, takes it to the market, gets a fair price for his potatoes, and goes back home. That's actually a just situation. That's a closed loop. The problem with capitalism, as you know, is just relentless growth, relentless extraction, right? Large corporations just extracting not just resources from the earth, but also dignity from workers, and just this endless growth loop that's out of control. So what I'm trying to do in this work is basically close that loop again. All the buyers have all the power in our food system. They dictate what farmers get paid. They dictate what conditions they're working under. It looks like I should drink that mango thing too.
Yeah, that's melon.
Melon.
So good.
So basically, if I can create a situation where I get a buyer to cough up power, to cough up decision making, to change their processes, and make room for these for the farmers and ranchers that I work with, I'm evening out that supply chain in terms of power distribution and closing the loop so that Black and brown farmers can actually have some economic justice and some wealth creation.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, it's bringing people closer to their food too, right? Like that's one of the main things that you're trying to do is like make it apparent like where you're getting it from, not outwardly like, oh, this is the person who picked your carrot, but just like this is the area that it came from and it's very close to you, and these are the things that they're doing to save the soil and bring you fresh food and also sustain like really, really like a healthy way of living, right? Like,
yeah.
It's
a phenomenon I call being farm removed, right?
Yeah.
You know, like so many of these, I think people are in general inherent, decently good by nature, but so many of these violent processes that we've talked about, bureaucracy, it comes together in meeting rooms with people who haven't been to a farm maybe ever, or maybe a really long time at best. Yeah. It's crazy what happens when you bring someone like that who maybe thinks they're informed about food systems issues, and you just simply bring them to a farm. Yeah. That's a way of kind of like metaphorically starting to close the loop, right? But seeing how they change when they actually see someone growing food, or hear about all the things they have to deal with, like for tech people in particular, I say, how you expect people to be full stack engineers and do every function, you pay them $250,000 a year for that. Well, farmers are expected to be full stack farmers. They're expected to do all their own food safety. Yeah. They're expected to do all their own production methods and stay up to date and understand whatever the hell you want day to day. Yeah. They're supposed to do all of their water regulation. They're supposed to do all of like their state regulations. They're supposed to do all their taxation. They're supposed to do and do all their sales and business development. That's a crazy amount of work for somebody who's already working 60 hours a week growing and has all the odds stacked against them. Yeah, but also is just like historically expected to be uneducated. Yeah. Like that's so crazy. And so what do you like? What do you personally bring to that philosophy? Like when you go into a meeting with somebody like that's at that high of a level, supposedly. Yeah. Because you're dealing with fucking CEOs. Absolutely. Of Fortune 500 companies and the way that they buy their food. Yeah. Like that's insane. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah. How do you like approach that? I see myself as more than anything as a bridge. Especially as someone who, is half white and half Mexican, who's sort of in between genders, who's and who's someone who has worked, like in service jobs and in nonprofits and the private sector since I spent 6 years working for corporate startups, and now has kind of come full circle. I feel like my primary role is almost as a translator. So going into, a meeting with like a tech executive or a hospital executive, I've been in the corporate world so I could speak that language. I can go to the farm also and talk to the farmer in Spanish about like what's growing on and what the crop plan is. Yeah. And I can talk to the nonprofit person who's helping me fill out a federal grant to support some of the work and speak nonprofit as well. So that's kind of how I approach it as a bridge, as a translator, as someone who can kind of put all these pieces together, because a lot of that is where the stuff breaks down, like literally people not speaking the same language, even if it is in English.
Wow, the quesadilla is so good.
Hell yeah, that stuff is good. It's a good one. I'm about to fuck up this sope too. Yep.
Sope is one of the finest foods on the planet.
Oh, isn't it amazing what you can do with corn?
Dude, when they're crispy on the bottom, they're the best thing in the world. That's a great salsa too. When it's just like they get like the creamy and like, I don't know, it's got to be like chile japoneses or something.
It's like habanero to me.
Yeah. Okay. So you've done like a million different things, right? Like you've worked in all of that. Like everything that you've done has brought you to the point where you are now. But like, I know you went to UT and you did your undergrad where?
At Humboldt State.
At Humboldt State, that's right. And you've worked in politics and you've worked in, that was because you used to run all the community farms in Austin, right?
Yeah, I was the interim head of the city of Austin's urban agriculture and community gardens program over there. Yeah.
So that was probably like a political
It was very
It-
political.
yeah.
Yeah, actually, that was a really formative experience for me. I just graduated from UT's community and regional planning program, so basically their urban planning program. Went to work for the city, and there was a political firestorm that happened that was white urban farmers versus Mexican-American environmental justice activists. And it was essentially a fight over gentrification. In East Austin, white urban farmers had been moving in for some time, and some had been there for a lot longer. But there was a really big dispute over land use and what you can do on an urban farm. And some of the farmers started doing things like hosting weddings or slaughtering chickens and really triggering the neighborhood that had just gone through like a giant wave of gentrification. And it also fought with the city for decades to get toxic land uses out of there. So here I was, 25, half white, half Mexican, fresh out of grad school. My boss went to Burning Man and never came back.
Oh, Jesus.
And so I was left running this program and managing this public engagement process, which I had to design and negotiate with all these community groups. And it was really intense. And I learned what happens when you don't double check a reporter's quote. And I also learned what it's like to get yelled at endlessly at a city council meeting, but it really thickened my skin. We were able to get to a really amazing compromise, I think, and get it passed by the Planning Commission and City Council. And ban a lot of the things that were hurting neighbors. And still make it a livable situation for urban farmers. So that was my first big brush with politics.
Yeah. And probably why you don't work in politics anymore. So what? I'm gonna get some of this mole.
Yeah.
And I think this is the mole Mama Elena. And it's carnitas. So I'm gonna dig into that. While I ask you this question, how did your upbringing influence your choice of career? You talked about that a little bit in this interview, but like, you say you grew up, you're straddling like two ethnicities, and you are also like going up against like these huge things, and it's just like there's an extreme amount of confidence that involved in even taking on these systems, right? So like how did your upbringing really influence that?
Well, that's an awesome question. So my parents are, two different ethnicities. My dad is a white atheist Republican. My mom is a Mexican Catholic Democrat. And so they would always joke about how they canceled out each other's votes. And I grew up really witnessing a ton of debate at the table, healthy debate. And my dad especially loved to debate me about everything, kind of singled me out for it in ways that really pissed me off growing up. But to this day, I'm so grateful that he did that because I learned how white, powerful men speak. And my parents are also both medical professionals. They both worked at Kaiser for decades. My dad is a doctor. My mom is a nurse. So I grew up, thinking about health in certain ways, and I diverge a lot from them in terms of like, they're very traditional Western medicine thinkers. But I also learned a lot about the ins and outs of Kaiser, which is helpful to me now as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But having that kind of like split set of political beliefs, but them having good-natured banter, my dad talking to me and debating me the way that he did really was good training, again, for kind of like that bridge mentality that I've carried with me my whole life.
Also, it sounds like it really helped you zero in on somebody and ruin their shit.
Plus, I also was an organizer for some time with Real Food Challenge, which is a food sovereignty national nonprofit that I'm now on the board of. And so learning about how people debate, especially a certain type of white guy, how they think through things, what persuades them, that plus having organizing training really has helped me in a lot of ways, because when looking at a supply chain like we were talking about earlier, there's so many people involved. And you have to know, where do I spend my energy? I can't talk and convince every single person. I can't give everybody a food system history. I can't get everybody to the farm. How do I strategically pick who I need to roll in the supply chain? So that is what guides a lot of kind of my strategic decisions, and I feel like my experience and upbringing when I'm making those decisions as well.
Oh, that was amazing.
It's all political, so I guess I did never leave.
Totally. I mean, we all live in the system, So being from a mixed family here in California, especially, but what did your grandparents cook, or your parents? Like, what was your go-to? Like in the middle of the week when you were yelling at each other at the table?
Well, my mom's Mexican side has an interesting, but not super uncommon history. So that side of the family, there's two branches. One is from New Mexico, actually, since the 1500s. The Spanish kept meticulous records. And so some of that New Mexico ethos survived, like the love for flour tortillas and certain types of salsas and things like that. And I spent a lot of time in New Mexico growing up.
Yeah.
And then the other branch of the family is from the Texas-Mexico border, where my grandma grew up, pretty poor. And their family was more of the kind where they never crossed the border crossed them, if they've been in Texas that long. Yeah. And it was very, it was like border poverty food. So essentially flour tortillas, rice and beans. So I always felt jealous going to Mexican friends' houses where they were, their moms were cooking like all kinds of interesting flavors and salsas and lots of different types of ingredients, because the food tradition that my mom comes from is so simple. So growing up, that's kind of what we ate. I ate a lot of quesadillas, a lot of rice and beans. And then, kind of like more standard American, like my mom loved to make chicken drumsticks in the middle of the week. My parents both worked so much that a lot of times it was me and my brother fending for ourselves. And on those nights, I made what is still my favorite comfort food, which is just a pot of rice with butter and soy sauce.
That's what's up. Oh, yeah. Sometimes I have to put hot dogs in tortillas.
Oh, yeah.
With American cheese on them.
That is legit. That is actually one of my mom's favorite foods. And I also, when I'm making tamales a year, I always try to sneak in hot dogs into a couple of them, Mexican corn dog.
Yeah. Oh, fuck yeah. That sounds so good. Yeah. That is so good. So what was the first food memory that you have? Like your most visceral food memory? I smell this and I think that. Or I was a baby and I looked up and they were cooking this.
Definitely. It's a good segue because it's definitely tamales. We used to our whole family go over to my tia Sylvia's house and we would crank out, like 35, 40 dozen of them. And that was just something to look forward to. We'd have out all the pan dulce, and just crank out just like all these dozens of red pork tamales. And that was like, especially growing up looking and passing as a white person, and feeling disconnected from it at times growing up, that was always so centering to smell that and smell the pork cooking.
Like feel the masa and stuff
exactly.
like that. Exactly.
All the heat from the masa steaming in the tamalera. And the taste of that pan dulce and the stickiness on your hands, from those are definitely the most visceral food memories.
Yeah, those are really good. They bring you to a place in your life where you're just like, it was so simple.
Exactly.
It's like there was nothing else to do but just like hang out, play, and eat. Yeah, it was a pretty amazing thing. So now that we're adults, we have a lot of opinions about food and experiences as well. And we live in the Bay Area, and that's an amazing food spot. You've traveled a lot too, but like, what's your go-to? Like, it's late, I might be stoned, I'm gonna pick up some food right now, and I don't really care if it ruins my morning because I'm over 30.
My go-to lately, actually, since I've been living in North Oakland the last couple of years, has been Burma Superstar. Like, never fails. Like,
place is bomb.
Walking back late or just like really late, it's right down the street from me. It's just so solid. And I also love about it that if you have someone visiting you from out of town, it's like such an easy, like, let me impress you with something the East Bay can offer you.
Yeah, totally.
Type of move.
Plus their menu, I hadn't been there in a couple of years. I went there a couple of weeks ago, and their menu is massive.
It is. There's so much to choose from.
Yeah.
There really is.
You gotta eat some of that. That is so good. Their chips are hella good, dude. They're like earthy. The corn that they're using is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Because these gotta be handmade tortillas.
Those are handmade for sure.
Yeah. It's good. It's really good. Everything is really
Happy
good.
place.
Yeah, so okay, so this is something like we all have our meals, right? Our most memorable meals. And it doesn't even have to be the food that makes it memorable. It's just sometimes you're sitting there and you look out and it's the setting and it's the people that you're with and the things like what's one of your most memorable
meals that you've ever had?
That was a great question. Weirdly, what immediately came to mind was just this random. I was in Baltimore for work, and I never had blue crab before. I grew up eating Dungeness crab.
Yeah.
And
because you're from Santa Cruz.
I'm from San Jose. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was just such a different experience, like just eating there with like a bunch of local yokels.
Yeah.
That had invited us out, and with the hammer and all that stuff. I love anything that requires work like that. Obviously, I think that's true for a lot of people. It really makes you feel connected. Just bust this with it open. As you bust open this piece of chicken. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. You better grab some of that.
Yeah.
We're slowing down. Like, this is a lot.
I know,
this is a lot of food.
Got a lot to get through.
We don't have to eat it all. This is a couple meals worth, and that's kind of the point of a mukbang. To eat a lot.
Yeah.
But like, this is so good.
I would say that, and then the second.
This is the mole verde, by the way.
The second most memorable meal for me would be when I was up in Humboldt. I loved living my life up there so much, and I lived right down the way from a rancheria and between Grove Country, and it was just this kind of rural cowboys and Indians paradise.
Oh, tight.
And I worked at this tiny little grocery store called Murphy's, and we all got invited to this thing called the Beast Feast, where local hunters who are both Indian and white bring together like bear and elk and deer and duck that they all catch in that area. Tight. It was so tight. So it cost like $40, which is nothing for all you can eat, game meat and drinks and stuff like that.
There's a fork right there.
Thank you.
That sounds great.
It was so fucking great.
Do they still do that?
They do.
The Beast Feast?
The Beast Feast.
If you're ever in Humboldt and you happen to be able to go to the Beast Feast,
go to the
Beast Feast.
Yeah.
Because that sounds amazing.
Can't miss event.
Yeah, hell yeah. You were talking about you worked in like grocery stores. Have you always worked with food?
Basically.
What was like your first job?
My first job was actually at Hollywood Video.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, R.I.P.
Working with popcorn.
Yeah. And then worked in college in a grocery store, rose to the level of assistant manager at the tiny Murphy's Market out there in Blue Lake.
That's what's up.
Yeah. And then worked as a bread delivery driver. Also worked at a pizza place. And then after college, I thought I was going to go into housing, and then ended up doing an AmeriCorps job because this was 2008, 2009. Yeah. There was nowhere to go. Yep. So I started a farmer's market in Sacramento that exists to this day, the Oak Park Farmer's Market, me and three other women. And we were actually the first farmer's market in California to accept EBT. Oh, right. I fought for that and worked with a wonderful woman at the state who helped me figure it out. And now, of course, it's a much more common practice. But at the time, again, the bureaucracy was really something.
That's really good.
It's really bomb.
Yeah. I'm just trying to fucking take bites of everything.
Yeah. But yeah, I did one more attempt to turn away from food. I got really into labor organizing on the U.S.-Mexico border, where my family's from.
Yeah, you've talked about that quite a bit.
Yeah.
When we've had our discussions.
Mm-hmm. So I was leading some solidarity delegations down to meet with women workers who were organizing for their rights in the sweatshops there on the border, and wrote a paper that was published on it, and thought I might go deeper into labor, but then got bitten by the food bug again, and got an internship for the City of Austin's food policy board and became a researcher for them, and that led to my city job that I mentioned earlier.
Oh, there you go.
So then I was all the way back in again. Couldn't stay away. Mm-hmm.
Oh shit, that's so good. That's really good. That is the pipián mole. That was the one that you really requested. Yeah. I kind of went wild on everything else. I was like, yeah.
I'm glad.
We're getting some more.
Hell yeah.
Don't worry, this is all going to get eaten. And these food trays are going to get reused until they disintegrate. Yeah. So now we talked about food systems, and we've talked about the bureaucracy involved with organic foods and how garbage that is. Yeah. And everything else. Let's start talking about what was your favorite from Los Moles today, and have you tried everything?
I don't think I've tried everything.
Oh, you got to try this then.
Yeah, let me get in here.
Right, yeah, I got a few more questions. Right, yeah, the what we eat is like everything that you smell, everything that you eat, like brings you back to a certain memory or some point in your life or relationships and stuff like that. And why do you think it's like so important to the fiber of our being? Like just like doing this, eating with somebody and talking and figuring out, like you figure out so much more about a person and you become so much closer because eating is intimate.
Yeah, it really is. I love that you use that word because I like to say that, well, there's a quote I read in a book by Alison Hope Alcon where she says, food is the most intimate commodity. It's the only one you put inside your body 3 times a day if you're lucky. Yeah. And
definitely if you're lucky.
This is a world that we currently live in that tries to strip us of humanity at every opportunity, tries to turn us into something else, into a consumer, essentially. And so doing something that is essentially human that we've been doing for hundreds of thousands of years is using our time to just eat food and talk shit. There's nothing more human than that. Nothing's being commodified in this moment. Nothing's being sold to each other. We're just shooting the shit and eating food and putting the most intimate commodity into our bodies. There's nothing better than that.
There isn't. So I wanted to ask you, is there anything that you would like to promote or let people know if people want to find you and ask you about what you're doing? Where can they do that? Email address or whatever. Yeah. But also it's like if there's anything that you really believe in that people should donate to or other things around the Bay Area that they should help out in, let us know.
Totally. Yeah. So 2 of the main organizations that I work with closely that I would really recommend supporting would be Kitchen Table Advisors, who I work with just about every day. They support small and mid-sized farmers and ranchers with free intensive business advising. Yeah. So these are farmers that get one-on-one support with a business advisor, and they get everything from QuickBooks support to getting land security to grants and things like that. So KTA is an amazing organization. They were just recognized as the Farm Advocate of the Year by a really well-regarded state nonprofit. So donating to them is a good thing to do. Another key partner I love working with is right here in Oakland, Mandela Partners. One you may be familiar with their grocery store. They also have a produce distribution business and so many other programs that support farmers in a meaningful way and also the community in a meaningful way. So I really recommend linking up with them. They sometimes have volunteer opportunities and hiring opportunities as well. So definitely throw some cash your way if you have the means to do so. And yeah, those are 2 really good options, I would say.
That's amazing. Well, also, thank you for suggesting Los Moles. I've been hearing about it for years. And I just haven't made it down to Emeryville to eat it. But I'm so glad that I did because it is so good. So if you're in Emeryville, go eat at Los Moles. Are they doing their buffet right now?
I actually don't know if they are. I haven't looked it out in a while.
Pre-pandemic, they would do this mole buffet.
It was insane.
It's like 16 different moles or something like that.
Yeah, insane.
All you can eat. And they have really, really good margaritas. But they're still there. So if you're down in Emeryville, go support places like that, and like downtown Oakland where they were just kind of thrived on the office buildings around them and the people that work there. They're probably hurting right now, so it'd be a good idea to go down there. So yeah, shout out Los Moles. It's delicious. Shout out Heather. And thank you very much. Thank you everybody for watching Bay Area Mukbang. I really appreciate it. And please go out to your local bars, restaurants, and small businesses to spend your money in your neighborhood. Support the people that are around you, please. And if you like what you see, please like and subscribe. Any suggestions for any future interviews that you'd like to see would be greatly appreciated, so put them in the comments. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.